welcome our guest teacher, Jomon Martin Sensei, who is one of the teachers for ZCO. So she teaches both at Great Vow Zen Monastery and at Heart of Wisdom. And she's one of the founding first generation of teachers at Heart of Wisdom. She is a licensed social worker, clinical social worker, and has been for about 20 years. She's a trainer in mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques and DSR, and an all-around terrific human being. So thanks so much for coming and joining us tonight, and you're going to be talking to us about service, the heart of service. So take it away, Jomon.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? How's the sound? Yes? Okay, excellent. What a treat to get to see the Zendo that I got to visit at the opening ceremony and see it looking so warm and wonderful, and then also getting to see the folks on Zoom as well. What a beautiful Sangha that we get to share in. I get to come up with a title, for the talk, really before the talk becomes itself. So it's been a lovely reflection to get to explore this question: what is the heart of service? And it's an integral part of our practice, I think. Maybe some of you already know that, and I don't know if technically it's easy to have some moments of interaction, but I hope we'll get to do that in this talk. Discovering the heart of service is, kind of do a bit of a spoiler alert. It is the experience of interconnectedness, of inner being, being expressed. And so I want to see if we can't reveal that maybe in this talk, and my experience as well as yours. So I wonder if you'd be willing to, those of you who are in the Zendo and those of you who are on Zoom, maybe type it in the chat. What are your associations with the word service? What are some phrases or the meanings or the archetypes? What does service mean to you? Would anybody be willing to volunteer something like that? And I can read it out from the chat, those of you who decide to write it down. Anybody in the Zendo want to say something briefly about what it means to you when it just pops in your mind? Service.
Giving back.
Giving back.
Compassion.
Compassion. Volunteer, help, I see. Being available for the needs of others.
Participation.
Participation. Service means being present for what is needed now.
Being an advocate.
Being an advocate for someone or something.
Building community.
Building community. Yeah, we talk about community a lot, don't we? But the real thing, where the rubber meets the road, that's another. Service to the Sangha is an expression of the Bodhisattva vow. Yes. Well, it looks like I'm not needed here, so thank you very much. Just kidding. That's beautiful. I agree, and I think it's wonderful to get to really excavate this and explore all the ways that the things that come forward are true. We can, when we practice the Dharma together, we just get to verify for ourselves, to see for ourselves whether the teachings are true. Now, I, in considering service, want to be sure that we get at some of what might be, when we talk about the immeasurables, the Brahma Viharas, there are the near enemies and far enemies of them. So of loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, sympathetic joy, the immeasurables. They're very opposites, the far enemy of them. Those are very obvious, that ill will is the opposite of loving kindness. But the near enemy, this kind of close and might even be convincing, is this possessive attachment, right? That looks like something like love or caring, but is really more of a strangling. Or the far enemy of compassion is cruelty. That's obvious. But the near enemy is sometimes seen as pity or maybe even despair or overwhelm. So some ways that we may feel something ish, something like one of these Brahma Viharas, but it's not it. So I wonder what some of the near enemies of service might be. How might we think about ways that we might have encountered or have an attitude for service in our heart that isn't quite it? Maybe you've run into that sometimes. Are there any things that you can think of that might fit that bill? Anyone in the chat? Oh, I see something. Martyrdom, guilt. Yes, yes, you got it. Service
Obligation.
for recognition, projection. What did the Zendo just say?
Obligation.
Obligation, control, giving with expectation of something back, control, doing good to look good, trying to fix something for someone rather than with them. Yes, yes, yes. It's so easy, isn't it? Trying to be worthwhile. Yeah. Yeah, where we're working out our own stuff, our own feelings of unworthiness, our own self-doubt, and it gets played out in on this stage of service. Our intentions need to be examined when we go into a relationship or a situation of service. It can be a way of proving our worthiness, might come from fearfulness or self-righteousness when we feel the guilt or should. Yeah, you guys are, you nailed it. Service, when it's coming from or fueled by any of that, which is really just, we could call it greed, anger, and ignorance. Mostly ignorance, when we're just misunderstanding, when we're just misinterpreting what it really is. It can be and feel a bit diminishing and exhausting. And where we get trapped in wanting to have a particular outcome, trapped in this pressure on ourselves and others, or pressure to have it look a certain way, arrive at a certain scale. This also really has to do with the simple truth of samsara. Samsara being the vicious cycle of suffering, just caused by constant search for security. We keep wanting to fix everything up, to get it all just right, to make it better. And then impermanence hits, it all falls apart. Suffering continues endlessly. And it's an important aspect of our teachings, being able to come to terms with this endless cyclical nature of existence, the observation of this beginningless, endless nature of existence that is characterized by suffering. In the Buddhist tradition, this is often looked at in terms of rebirth, that we keep being over and over again coming into rebirth in various realms of existence: the human realm, the heavenly realm, the realm of the jealous gods, the hungry ghosts, the animal realm, and hell realms. And you can take that literally. You can, that may be some way that we can look at this life in its complexity. We can also notice that those are states of mind that we can experience moment by moment in this very life, that we can feel deeply jealous, that we can feel that we're starving, that we can feel completely subsumed with anger, which is itself kind of a hell. We can experience all these in this one life, and we can look around and see how always there have been plagues, how humans from time immemorial have suffered with disease, with inequity, with oppression, with violence, and indeed trying to figure out ways to get things just the way we want them, to fix it. And then it all changes again, this fundamental instability, this groundlessness. So we have this in the mix of this heart of service that we bring. And in a way, to me, it can be, in a way, a bit of a comfort, because if indeed, as it would certainly seem, that this is endless, then doesn't that just allow me to just put one foot in front of the other and do whatever it is that's in front of me to do, to just do whatever I can, given that I'm probably not going to solve it. You know, there can be somewhat of a relief in this, in a way. Another way to come at this aspect of samsara, I found out in some of my exploration that the root of that word has a meaning that is to flow, to flow. And it means the flowing on of the stream of consciousness from one moment to the next, the flowing on of the stream of consciousness from one lifetime to another. I think that's also quite comforting. It's a way we can experience this life as simply flow, that we're just flowing into this vast, incomprehensible world, suffering all around, and we're just here in the mix for a moment. The Buddha said that this is really fundamentally unknowable. An understanding of samsara is fundamentally unknowable. It certainly feels that way, doesn't it? He said that for as many eons of lifetimes we have suffered as there are grains of sand in the Ganges, and even more vast. Samsara can also be seen as wandering on. And Thanissaro Bhikkhu says that samsara is the answer, not to the question, where are we, but to the question, what are we doing? What are we doing? So instead of a place, it's a process. This tendency to keep creating worlds and then moving into them. And as one world falls apart, you create another one and you go there. And at the same time, you bump into other people who are creating their own worlds too. So we can look at this flowing on and hold this question, what are we doing? What are we doing? I appreciate in our Gatha of Atonement, maybe you get to do that sometimes in your service, there's a reference to our beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance. Born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. Again, what a relief to just recognize that we're just part of this. We're just part of this. And not only that, we can atone, which is just a recognition of our humanness, just a recognition of the way that we're just tangled up in this. And so what are we doing? What can we do? Also part of our humanness, and this is, I think, where it hinges for me, also part of our humanness is bodhicitta, or this awakened heart mind, this wish to become enlightened for the sake of all beings, this wish to become enlightened to alleviate suffering. And what a beautiful hinge, what an important next step. It's a miraculous fact that we can utilize, that we can become aware of suffering, and that it can transform. It is in fact necessary as part of our fuel as bodhisattvas to be awakened. Bodhisattvas are awakened beings. They walk among us. And we're all perhaps bodhisattvas in training. And there's many training programs. This just happens to be one of them. Many wonderful teaching and training programs where we literally exercise our bodhisattva muscles for compassion, for wisdom, for view, for having the right view of how things really are, so that we can then step forward in ways that alleviate suffering. And that we can look at ourselves, look at the ways that we might be hooked a little bit by those near enemies. We develop a deep sensitivity to what's actually happening internally, externally. And that gives us a hint. That gives us a hint to see, hey, am I on the right track, or am I kind of veering off to the side just a little bit? If we're just a couple of degrees off from being truly of service. So I understand that the Sangha here in Corvallis is going to be studying Shantideva, or maybe already are, which is beautiful. And so I've brought in a little bit of that here too. Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva is also one such training program, and includes the paramitas, or the perfections, which are here is how bodhisattvas act. Here is what's needed in your bodhisattva toolbox. Here's the map, here's the fuel. These are sort of calisthenics that help shape us into who we really are. And it happens in the doing. And we get to practice that together. So one of the paramitas, and in other training programs in Buddhism, very often the first step that's listed is generosity. And that's also true in the paramitas. Generosity is often listed among ways to even just begin the path of practice. And so it's a wonderful way to begin, but it's important, I think, to look so that it's not coming from some place of guilt, or from some place of should, or from some place of obligation, but from a place of openness, from a place of curiosity, or from a place of practice. Can be an expression of service. How to bring it forth from a place of enlargement rather than diminishment, right? And here's the spoiler part, is that we have to see the interdependence of all things. This view is what's needed. So I want to share one of my very favorite sutras, one of my very favorite teachings of the Buddha. It's called the Siddhaka Sutta, and also known as the Bamboo Acrobat. The Bamboo Acrobat. And this is from a translation by Andrew Olensky. The Buddha addressed the monks. Once upon a time, monks, a bamboo acrobat, setting himself upon his bamboo pole, addressed his assistant, Medakathalika. So if you can imagine, these two acrobats their trick, as I understand it, is to put a, imagine a very tall bamboo pole. They both climb up it to the top, and one gets on the other's shoulders, and they balance on this bamboo pole. Pretty dangerous. So the acrobat addresses his assistant, Metakathalika. Come, you, my dear Metakathalika, and climbing up the bamboo pole, stand upon my shoulders. Okay, master, the assistant Metakathalika replied to the bamboo acrobat. And climbing up the bamboo pole, she stood on the master's shoulders. So then the bamboo acrobat said this to his assistant, Metakathalika. You look after me, my dear Metakathalika, and I'll look after you. Thus, with us looking after one another, guarding one another, we'll show off our craft, receive some payment, and we'll safely climb down the bamboo pole. This being said, the assistant Metakathalika said this to the bamboo acrobat. That will not do at all, master. You look after yourself, master, and I will look after myself. Thus, with each of us looking after ourselves, guarding ourselves, we'll show off our craft, receive some payment, and safely climb down from the bamboo pole. That's the right way to do it. So I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has a sense of who's right. What do you think? Look after each other or look after ourselves?
Look after ourselves.
I love that there's dissension in the ranks. Because, yes, it's starting to come through in the chat. So a few people said both. It's a trick question. So, but a good question. The rest of the sutra goes, the Buddha said, just like the assistant, Metakathalika said to her master, I will look after myself. So should you, monks, practice the establishment of mindfulness. You should also practice the establishment of mindfulness by saying, I will look after others. Looking after oneself, one looks after others. Looking after others, one looks after oneself. And how does one look after others? By looking after oneself, by practicing mindfulness, by developing it, by doing it a lot. And how does one look after oneself? By looking after others, by patience, by non-harming, by loving kindness, by caring for others. Thus, looking after oneself, one looks after others, and looking after others, one looks after oneself. Isn't that a beautiful story? I love that one. It's both. And it's, again, it's one of these near enemies. It's very easy for us to just miss or have a little bit of a blind spot for one side or the other of these. For some of us, we forget to look after ourselves. For other of us, it might be a good idea to just refocus a little bit on others. Sometimes that differs in our lives. So important that they both get brought to bear on this, on service. So generosity isn't just a one-way street, isn't just a unidirectional giving. It has inherent in it this receiving. It has to. How else could it possibly even be? I often picture generosity and gratitude as sort of the recycling arrows, that they really merge into one another in this way, in the same way that the bamboo acrobat parable illustrates. That this experience of giver, receiver, and gift is much larger than the sum of its parts. When we label ourselves as givers or find ourselves locked into a particular habit, or maybe we're more comfortable giving, or if it's more we feel like we don't have anything to give, or we're overwhelmed, which may be in some ways the case, to look at those experiences and see what they're made of. We see ourselves as constricted in some way, whether that's forgiving or receiving, we're limiting ourselves, we're labeling ourselves in this kind of frozen identity, selfing kind of a way. Whereas it's really more of a process. And it's true, I think research even bears this out, that people who objectively have the least tend to be more generous. People who are at or around poverty generally offer a much larger percentage of their income in sort of a donation practice than other people who might have a lot more. I experienced that in real life at least once when I worked in a community mental health agency in Southern Illinois, which is where I'm from. And one of the participants in the program where I was working, she was, I think, in her 60s, and everybody smoked and, had spent a lot of money on cigarettes. So they really didn't have a lot of money to begin with. And then all the cigarettes made that even less. And, and here being in a community mental health agency, there was not a lot of money in the agency either. And there was a point at which we were having a cash flow problem, and they were having trouble just stocking the bathrooms, well enough. And this woman took out of her own money, she brought in bars of soap that I think she bought at the dollar store and just left them in the bathrooms, which, for her represents quite a lot in the scheme of her income, her very little disposable income. And she also bought a cup of coffee for one of my coworkers when he first started working there, because she thought he was a participant in the program, and wanted to make him feel welcome. So that kind of generosity is really inspiring. And the Buddha talked about this, a very similar example. Once when the Buddha was about to teach the Dharma to a congregation in the forest, it got dark, and several people offered their lamps, but there was a homeless woman whose only possession was an alms bowl, which she offered to serve as an oil lamp. On realizing this, the Buddha exclaimed to his congregation that this woman's virtue was the most excellent, as she had offered her total wealth, her one possession, the begging bowl. So this kind of gratitude, again, not give till it hurts, but give when it is the natural thing, when we're filling, when we're overflowing with this natural next step. When we find ourselves just, when it's obvious that this is what's in front of us to do. I think that's where the woman that I knew, where her actions were coming from. And another area of study I like to look at are altruistic stories of people who do seemingly superhuman things. People who run into burning buildings to rescue people, or dive into frozen rivers to save pets or people. And inevitably, when the media gets a hold of them after the event is over, they call them a hero, and the person inevitably always says, "No, I'm not a hero. Anybody would have done this." Right? Don't they all just say that? There is this natural and completely, it is not about making a name for oneself. It is not about any kind of a should at all. It's just a natural next step. Feels obvious. So one way I think, at least for me, I've found very, very helpful in cultivating generosity is the practice of gratitude, is the recognition that of what we've been given, the recognition of the 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 good fortune that we have, the good fortune that we have to practice together. That is one of the beautiful aspects of having this human life, this rare and precious human life. They say that the the heavenly realms, the heavenly realm and the jealous God realm, which we can think of as maybe like the famous people, that seem to have everything, and yet, maybe also kind of miserable sometimes they're in the jealous realms, but that they aren't suffering enough necessarily to really bring themselves to practice. And of course, then in the animal realm or the hell realms or the hungry ghost realms, that the suffering is overbearing, that there's too much suffering to even begin to look at practicing the Dharma. But here in the human realm, we have just enough suffering, just enough to bring us to the cushion. Nobody comes to a Zen center because everything's going so awesome. I don't know, maybe it did for you, but it wasn't for me. It was because I was suffering and I had some real questions about that. So just being grateful for the miraculousness of getting to practice in this way together, that the teachings have been preserved for this long is pretty miraculous, that they've been passed down generation to generation to generation, and now we have access to them. We get to share them and practice them in this community. It's more than just reading about it, isn't it? That we're taking care of each other in this way by practicing together, by taking care of the temple, by just showing up. You can absolutely credit yourself with generosity every time you show up. It matters when you do. It really does. So recognizing and practicing gratitude is a powerful, powerful practice. Also, that I believe fuels generosity. So I want to just share a poem that is a wonderful example of this. And it's called Small Kindnesses by Danusha Lamaris. Small kindnesses. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers still say, "Bless you," when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back, for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make together when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead. You first. I like your hat." That's it. That's Small Kindnesses. Danusha Lamaris. Yeah. So here is this interconnection. We can't do this without each other. We can't. And so much of our world, so much of our life is characterized by a customer mindset or experience, or a consumer mindset or experience, this unidirectional. And this just blows that wide open, this true experience of interconnection, when we can really see what's happening. And when we can take responsibility for that. Once we are aware of what's happening, that this is a relationship, that we take responsibility. This isn't just a fleeting temple, as the poem says. This is an actual temple. And so just showing up is taking responsibility. And there may be some other way for you to take responsibility. I certainly know that when I was doing work in community mental health, which is a very difficult setting to work, and I would have moments of burnout for sure, but I always returned to what I knew was true, is that I was the only one who really could be responsible for, at least for my attitude. I may not have been wildly successful in the work I was doing, but I could at least bring a mind of appreciation to my coworkers, to my clients, for the place, for the job, for the paycheck. Can at least do that. And so similarly, what is our attitude for being in relationship with Sangha on a regular basis? Inevitably, you will be disappointed. Inevitably, you will be irritated. These are very important ingredients for Sangha practice. And it's the only way. It's the only way. I have one last question for all of you that I'll save till the end, which is coming very soon. But this, even as we're being challenged by each other and invited by each other to step further into Sangha life, further into practice, it's open invitation. I also love the parable of the 3 stone cutters. You may be familiar with this one. It's not Buddhist necessarily, but it's a great parable. A man came across 3 stone cutters and asked them what they were doing. And the first one replied, "Well, I'm making a living." And the second one kept on hammering while he said, "I'm doing the best job of stone cutting in the entire country." And the third one looked up with a visionary gleam in his eye and said, "I'm building a cathedral." And so that is, we get to decide that. We get to bring ourselves into this Sangha in a particular way. So to any of you who are new, just showing up is definitely practice, definitely counts. And then maybe if you're new, believe me, you're the best person to help an even newer person. Do not underestimate yourself. And so my experience of service has been that it moves the me to a we. I become part of something larger than myself and much less lonely. So I have one more poem and then one more question. And so the poem is called Wellness Check by Andrea Gibson. Wellness Check. In any moment, on any given day, I can measure my wellness by this question. Is my attention on loving, or is my attention on who isn't loving me? Very nice. Wellness check. So I just want to open up the question briefly and hear maybe what has been your experience of service and how does it benefit your practice? I'd love to hear from just a couple of people, or maybe anybody who would like to type it in the chat or speak up about what has been your experience of service and how it has benefited your practice. Just a few examples of this.
Showing up.
Showing up. How does that benefit your practice?
That helps me see myself
Yeah.
in the eyes of other people.
Yeah, nice, thank you.
Paying attention.
Paying attention. Does the act of service helps you pay attention?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a poet.
Hmm?
I'm a poet.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I have to pay attention.
Yes. Yes. Someone has written caring for animals, and that is definitely an act of service. And how does that benefit your practice?
Seeing deeper.
Seeing deeper. Yeah. Yeah. When we show up. Someone on Zoom, Luca, says, I'm always surprised how good the little acts of kindness make me feel. Yes. And then you send, holding a spot for others to practice, I have to show up. It's true. It's true. And Jomi exercises the muscle of immediate response to the need instead of looking at my own needs first. Yes. And Luca, I can approach practice more generously. Absolutely. Isn't it just amazing how it's just built in? We have inherited a very sophisticated tool here that has a lot of, it's more than a tool, it's a sophisticated, really all-encompassing way of being. And every aspect of it is important. And you're all just beautifully demonstrating that tonight. So I want to share one example too from Shanti Deva's Way of the Bodhisattva. The very last chapter is an entire dedication of merit. This is another way that we can experience and express and practice generosity. So maybe take a moment to bring to mind someone or some group or some way that you would like any of the merit, any of the goodness, any of the beneficiality of this evening to be transmitted, to be given away, to be shared with someone or someone. And as if we could just shoot it like fireworks out into this world, or with each breath, it is offered to other beings, giving away any benefit we may possibly have amassed here together today. Let's do that now. And as they say in the 12 steps, you have to give it away to keep it. All right. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for practicing. It's an honor to get to be here in your temple and to share in the fruits of your practice. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
Would you be open to a couple of questions?
I hope so. Please.
And does anybody have a comment or a question that you'd like to ask Jomon Sensei?
I appreciated everybody's participation.
Well, your talk was just so full, and probably everybody's really feeling very full.
They're chewing on it. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Jomon.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.